Our first presenter is Alexia Popescu from Niles West High School.
Can you hear me? Can everyone hear me? Yes? All right. Hi, my name is Alexia, and today I'll be speaking about my fuel cell project. So one of the reasons this is so important is because of energy, and we need energy in every part of our life. But recently, we've been seeing massive power outages, both nationally and globally, ranging from several months ago in Puerto Rico to even a couple weeks ago in Venezuela, where millions of people were left without electricity. But it's not just the millions without electricity in those short weeks. It's also the 1.2 billion who, on average, do not have access to electricity on a daily basis. And this is a problem we need to address. So one possible solution are solid oxide fuel cells. And according to the United States Department of Energy, these are a possible reliable backup energy solution. So instead of having massive power outages, these could be that generation to prevent. So essentially it works through reverse electrolysis process. So our electrolysis splits water. Here, hydrogen and oxygen are coming together to form water. And this process converts chemical to electrical energy. Now you can see in the bottom right corner, there are different components of this fuel cell. So anode, electrolyte, and cathode. However, improving even one component can improve the entire system, thus improving performance. And so I chose to focus on improving the anode, specifically the material and the process of preparing the anode material. So I looked at an emerging material called strontium vanadium molybdenum oxide, or SVM. And SVM has some key material advantages, including sulfur tolerance, coking tolerance, and excellent conductivity. In order for this material to be widely implemented, however, the process of preparing it, or the synthesis, needs to be better established, since right now it's an emerging material. So the goal of my preparation for this powder was to result in this material structure, which is a perovskite. In the perovskite, it allows for that excellent conductivity of the SVM to really shine. And it has to do with the arrangement of the elements. So on the outside is strontium and then oxygen in this octahedron shape. However, both vanadium and molybdenum have to fit into the center. And this is a problem from a chemical standpoint because molybdenum has an ionic radius that is much larger. So fitting them both into the center is a challenge. So having this process, I started with synthesis, and then I did phase characterization, which is essentially indicating to me what structures are present. And my decision was whether it's greater than or less than 95% perovskite. If yes, my goal was met. If no, I have to tinker with it and change different conditions, whether that be temperature, atmosphere, etc., and repeat this process until I reach the end goal. So I started with a more simple process called the solid state. There's just 3 steps. I start with oxide forms the precursor powder, and then I add ethanol, mixing it with a ball mill, and lastly, synthesizing it in a high temperature furnace. And in order to establish whether it's in that perovskite phase, I did X-ray diffraction, or XRD. The way this works is an X-ray, you can see in the bottom right, shines through a slit, and then is diffracted as it passes through a crystal, resulting in a very specific pattern. That pattern can indicate what structures are present. So I decided to start with temperature and atmosphere as my conditions that I would change. So 1200 is the amount that they use in literature. However, having 1000 would lower the power used, so that could be helpful. And in the atmosphere, I tried air, 5% hydrogen, and 100%. When I say 5% hydrogen, I find that the other percent, the 95, is argon. And argon is an inert stable gas, which would allow for this to synthesize properly. So this is what my data looks like. And there's a lot going on, but essentially you see the stars. And the stars indicate all the peaks that align with those stars are in perovskite phase. We want more aligning peaks. What I did notice from these 3 different conditions I used was it's important to increase temperature. So this supported the previous findings, 1200 the powder is homogeneous compared to the solid state, more homogeneous. So then I would put this in the oven and lastly the furnace to synthesize. So in order to improve this citrate technique, I looked at different atmospheres. So I did 5%, 1%, and 0.1. And what I found is that actually decreasing the percent hydrogen would improve the percent perovskite. And I think one reason this may be is because molybdenum seems to be very sensitive to changes in the atmosphere. And I want to change the atmosphere to have a very low percent hydrogen in order to not have the molybdenum switch to an undesired phase. However, you can see there still are plenty of impurities, plenty of peaks that don't align with the star. And so that means it was time for me to try something very different than I had done before. Not just changing temperature or atmosphere, but instead looking at the material properties of each of these powders. So I took a step back and I noticed that the melting temperatures of the powders I was using, 2 out of 3 of them were lower than the 1200 that I was sintering at. So I thought maybe one reason I'm having all of these impurities is because the powders are actually melting and becoming liquid before getting the chance to react and become the powder I need it to be. And that's why I decided to try something new and do multiple steps. Instead of room temperature to 1200 degrees Celsius, I would do small increments, and after each increment, take it out of the furnace and grind it for even more mixing. And so this time, you can see a visible change. So I started with salt and pepper-like texture, and then there's a gray powder, and finally there's a black homogeneous powder, which indicates finally that it's well mixed. And here you can notice that there's the 600 degrees Celsius less than the 680 melting temperature, and it corresponds. So the pictures actually are corresponding with these bar charts, and that final blue bar is 96%, which meets that required threshold of 95. Now some may bring the point that companies like Sigma Aldrich or other industries require 99% purity for you to buy it. However, for the scope of this project, 96% was enough to show that improvement in the synthesis. If I wanted to get 99%, I can just repeat that last step of 1200 over and over and keep taking it out and grinding it. However, for this purpose, 96 is enough. Now, just to get another perspective at the data, here is what the XRD looked like after I processed it in the Jade analysis software. And if you think about integrals or the area under the curve, the area under this curve is taken by a specific algorithm through the program. So this 96% that we see essentially means that out of all the area underneath the curve, 96% of that is in the perovskite phase, that's the desired phase. And a short note about error. So that squiggly line on the top is actually the error bar, and it's factored in when I'm doing the analysis. So that takes into account machine noise and other error from XRD. One thing that could improve this project would be, of course, to have more trials, but even a further step, instead of only looking experimentally at it, I could take also a computational approach. And what I mean by that is taking the data that I have now, and if I had more data through more trials, I could put them in a data set and use that to make an algorithm. So I could look into machine learning and other processes in order to actually predict what should theoretically be the best combination of conditions and then compare that with my experimental value. But that would be a next step. So in conclusion, I had some key takeaways. So for SVM specifically, scientists should use lower reducing atmosphere, citrate technique instead of solid state. And one of the most innovative parts, I think, is this multi-step process. And really, this can be applied in all parts of science, not just the thousands who are working with fuel cells, but in synthesis, we should look at the specific material properties when designing a process. So
finalist is in the room getting pre-grilled by the final judges. And so what we'd like to do now is present award certificates to all of the semi-finalists who are part of today's competition. So what we'd like you to do, if you can come up to the stage and accept your certificate and stay on the stage so that we can all be on here together for a photo, that would be appreciated. F. Berger Wolf, Oak Park and River Forest High School. George Fasakis, Michael Vialis, and Kuba Ciapella, Wheeling High School. Aaron Freeman, Oak Park and River Forest High School. Ronan Glussman, Oak Park and River Forest High School. Taylor Gutt and Emily Lucas, Wheeling High School. Rushi Bhatt, Niles North High School. Yusra Aftab, Niles West High School. Daniel Kudzic, Niles West High School. Jasmine Key and Alex Rotberg, Krista Redmond, Niles North High School. Natalie Serratos, Oak Park and River Forest High School. Catherine Benstead, Niles West High School. Erlene Carr, Wheeling High School. Alex Popescu, Niles West High School. Maximus Beach, Oak Park and River Forest High School. Nikith Rao, Stevenson High School. Cecilia Doyle, Oak Park and River Forest High School. Muhammad Afzal, Niles West High School. Hyman Seed, Stevenson High School. Rebecca Zurich, Carmel High School. Rishi Ray, Barrington High School. Jackson Gross, Wheeling High School. Kate Karaman, Niles West High School. Dibi Kumar, Niles North High School. Thank you and congratulations to all of our semifinalists. This is our 8th year of positive impact at Wheeling High School. And this event today wouldn't be possible, and none of these events for the last 8 years would have been possible without the support of a lot of people. So first and foremost, we'd like to thank the administration of Wheeling High School for supporting such a great event and opening this event to so many schools and so many scientists. So give it up for our There are a million things that could go wrong at an event like this, but there seem to be 100 million things that go right. And the reason that those things go right is because we have awesome staff here at Wheeling High School. When I was talking to the building staff yesterday, he was going over so many details to the point where it turned into really hard to control, like eye rolls, like really? And he stopped and he looked at us, and he calls Mr. Hanrahan B, and he calls me Mr. Gregg. And he said, B and Mr. Gregg, I just want it to be perfect. And I think that sentiment not only reflects our building staff, but our tech staff, our front office staff, and all of the support staff that make this possible. So please, a big hand for all of those guys. We ask so much of the people in the building to give up their time, from something as simple as hey, gym teachers, get your class out of here because we want to use the gym. And hey, kids, I know you like to sit at this spot and eat your lunch, but there's going to be a car there tomorrow, so you got to find a new spot to eat with your friends. But we also rely a lot on people outside and invite them in to be a part of this. So that's sponsors at other schools that allow their students to be a part of this and miss their day. One of the things that we pride ourselves on in this competition is that we're able to get high caliber judges that are professional engineers, professional scientists, and health professionals from a whole bunch of different companies. And I've collected the company logos from people that take time off of their job to represent and support this important work that you guys are doing today. So I'd like to give the biggest and loudest hand to our judges and invited speakers that come to make this event a success. And now it's time to invite our second finalist / victim onto the stage. While Cecilia's getting set up, I'm going to raise the heart rate of our third finalist, who I'd like to come up to the front. Aaron Freeman from Oak Park
my name is Cecilia Doyle. I'm from Oak Park and River Forest High School, and my project was on quantifying the carbonyl content in plant-based protein powders, and I did this using titration to consider them as a replacement of traditional protein sources in malnutrition supplements. My inspiration for this project comes from my travels to Guatemala, where I work with children in an elementary school, and while they're now receiving quality education, a big issue that I've noticed is many of the children come to school hungry every day. So I decided to research malnutrition. When researching malnutrition, I discovered in a study done by Bazzano et al. In 2017 that over 50 million children under the age of 5 are malnourished. 16 million of these children have what is called severe acute malnutrition, which is when a child has a weight for height measurement that is 3 standard deviations below the averages for their age. The SAM is commonly treated by what are called ready-to-use therapeutic foods, or RUTFs. RUTFs can come in many forms, such as bars, powders, and pastes, and essentially they just contain essential nutrients for the child to gain weight. A big issue with RUTFs is their expense. Because they're so expensive, a lot of times the children who need them can't gain access to them. In a study done by Borg et al. In 2018, it was found that milk protein can often account for 50% of the price of the entire product. So I decided to investigate plant proteins that could potentially replace this expensive milk protein source so that it would increase access for the children that need it. To study these plant proteins, I studied their breakdown, or what's also known as protein oxidation. So in an organism, there are free radicals and antioxidants. And free radicals are unstable because they are missing an electron. So an antioxidant stabilizes it through what's called electron donation. Here you can see that the free radicals and the antioxidants are in balance. On the left side is an example of an amino acid. This amino acid is called lysine, but there are many different kinds of amino acids, and essentially what they are many amino acids combined to form a protein. This part of the amino acid is called its side chain. And so when a protein is exposed to oxidative stress, which can occur naturally, but also can occur when it's exposed to heating, like what would happen during the processing of RUTFs, this increases the number of free radicals in the organism. When there are too many free radicals, the antioxidants can no longer control and stabilize the free radicals, and so they attack the side chain of the amino acid, breaking it apart and forming what are called carbonyl groups. So the purpose of my experiment was to quantify the carbonyl content in the different plant proteins that I investigated to determine the nutritional stability of the plant proteins. So if a protein had a higher carbonyl content, then it would be less nutritionally stable because it's breaking down more. My independent variable was the type of protein that I used. I studied soybeans and chickpeas. My dependent variable was the carbonyl content in those proteins. My experimental hypothesis stated that if different protein sources were examined, then there would be a different carbonyl content because the proteins would undergo oxidation at different rates. And my null hypothesis was that there would be no statistically significant difference between the two groups. Essentially what I did for my project is I used a process called titration. In the video here you can see that an acid solution that's coming from the top, it's called a hydrochloric acid, is dropping through that counter, and that's measuring the volume of the acid solution that's being added to the chemical mixture that I have on the bottom. That blue probe that's coming down there is a pH probe, and it's measuring the pH of my solution as that acid is added. So to begin my experiment, I first had to test the acid solution that I was using for the titration process, and I did this by combining sodium carbonate and deionized water. Secondly, I had 3 different types of blanks with different chemical compositions, and the purpose of the blanks was to compare them to one another to test for any acid interference that I wasn't expecting. I heated each of these samples for 2 hours at 80 degrees Celsius and then titrated them using the same method as before. This video shows the heating process that I used for all of my titrations. You can see that the sample is hanging down from above, and it's sitting in a water bath that's being constantly stirred, and the thermometer is measuring the temperature as it occurs. Then I could test my experimental groups where I used the same chemicals, but In the case of chickpea, I used 100 milligrams of the chickpea powder, and in the case of soybean, I used 100 milligrams of the soybean powder. I then heated all of these samples at 80 degrees Celsius for 2 hours and then titrated them again. So once I completed all of my titrations, my graphs looked like this. On the titration curve, you can see on the x-axis, it shows the volume of the hydrochloric acid solution that's being added, and on the y-axis, it's the pH. And what I'm looking for on these titration curves is the point of inflection. The point of inflection of a curve is when it changes from facing downwards to facing upwards. I find this point of inflection doing a mathematical calculation where I find the first derivative, and I'm just looking for the minimum of this derivative. I pull this value out of the table, and for this specific trial, I received an endpoint that was a volume of 16.357. I completed this graphing and derivative process for all of my different titrations to receive endpoints for every single one. Once I received all of my endpoints, I was able to put them into my carbonyl content equations. So the first equation gives an acid solution concentration, where W1 is the purity of the sodium carbonate in the specific trial, and I also use the endpoint from the specific trial. I can use this acid concentration to plug into my carbonyl content equation, where EPBA is the endpoint that I got in my blank A trial, and EP is the endpoint of the specific trial, and W3 is the specific weight of the protein in that trial. So then once I had all of my carbonyl contents, I was able to graph my data, and this graph shows the average carbonyl content in chickpea versus soybean powders. You can see on the graph that the carbonyl content in the chickpea powder was lower than the carbonyl content in the soybean powder. And after running a single factor ANOVA statistical test, I received a p-value of 0.01, which was below my alpha value of 0.05, and I can reject my null hypothesis and conclude that my data is statistically significant. So what this means is because the chickpea was lower in carbonyl content, it is more nutritionally stable. Because if the carbonyl content is lower, it's not breaking down as much. This means that the chickpea protein should be recommended for use in ready-to-use therapeutic foods. Throughout my experiment, I ran into some challenges, the first of which was because my procedure was developed from Black and Farrell at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory in Golden, Colorado. There they had access to a dry heating block that I did not, so I had to develop a novel heating method where I instead used a water bath to heat my samples. Additionally, in my blank A trials, I determined values that were much lower than I was expecting, but because my values for blank B and blank C were so similar, I concluded that the error must have occurred specifically in the blank A trials and not in the overall experiment. The potential positive impact of this experiment is extremely likely because with more research on the breakdown of these different plant proteins, companies such as Nutriset, which is one of the largest producers of ready-to-use therapeutic foods, can use this information to potentially change the ingredients that they're using to make their RUTFs. Additionally, organizations such as the World Health Organization can use information like this to make different recommendations for the composition of RUTFs. With this changed composition, it would decrease the cost of these RUTFs because with an alternative protein source that is less expensive than the protein sources that are currently being used, the cost would decrease, which would help to increase access to these supplements for children who need them. Further research for this experiment includes discovering a way to develop a novel RUTF that would not use the protein sources that are currently being used, as well as to determine how plant-based proteins can be grown locally in the areas that need RUTFs the most. If the plants can be grown locally and sourced locally and the production can occur locally, then it will help the economy around that area to boost as well because the production is occurring right where it's needed. This would also mean discovering how RUTF production could occur on a larger scale, which is being done by Nutriset, who has organizations around that do produce RUTFs locally, but there's not a lot of emphasis placed on it, so with more research, the emphasis on initiatives such as these could grow. These are people that helped me throughout my experiments, and these are my 40+ references. Thank you.
It's my pleasure to welcome our first of two invited speakers. Dr. Eric Brown is an associate professor of biology at North Park University. Dr. Brown earned his PhD in cell and molecular biology from Northwestern University, and I have absolute proof that he's passionate about high school student science. And that's because talking with Dr. Brown to get this set up, he told me about his current career plans, which is to transition from being a college professor to being a high school science teacher, and hopefully bringing students to this event in the not too distant future. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Eric Brown.
Okay, well, thank you very much for allowing me to come speak to you today, and thank you for the organizers for inviting me. If you enjoyed the talk that I'm going to give you in a second here, I really encourage you to check out my TED Talk that I gave a couple years ago. It talks about a very similar topic, but in a slightly different manner. So if you like this, I think you'll enjoy this as well. So the title of my talk today is basically, do you need scientific research experiences to survive in today's increasingly complex world? And I'm hoping to convince you today that the answer is yes. So we'll see how I do. So when you think about science, I want you to think of it being a process. The process of science is far more important than any of the scientific facts or figures. So should you be able to draw the 20 amino acids? Should you know the atomic number for carbon? What is the value for gravity? What happens when you have an earthquake? These are all things that are good. You should know these things, and you're better off knowing them than not. But I'm hoping to convince you today that the process of science is the key. That's the thing that's enduring. So if you know the scientific method, you might say, what is the scientific method? We observe things, we question them, we do a little bit of research. Then we make a hypothesis. Then we say, okay, let's do an experiment. Let's get more data, let's finally draw a conclusion. But the key is we're thinking for ourselves. We're using our senses, our sight, our hearing, to make a conclusion. To tell you about this, I want to tell you about a woman. Her name is Elizabeth Holmes, and her company she designed is Theranos. And what I want to do is I want to tell you about her a little bit, because this is an excellent story about the importance of the scientific method. So by all accounts, Elizabeth Holmes, she is crushing it. By 19 years old, she started a multi-billion-dollar company, sorry, billion with a B. Many magazines are saying she's the next Steve Jobs, who founded Apple. How? Why? She's created this company, and it's a medical diagnostic company. So what it does is with a finger prick, you can do hundreds, thousands of tests that can benefit your health. So instead of having a huge vial of blood drawn, you can do it with a finger prick. This is her staring at her device. How does she do it? It's all about nanoscience. This is an area that's near and dear to my heart. My research background in my current lab focuses on nanomedicine, so using nanoparticles for cancer diagnostics, therapeutics. That's what my lab does, and that's what she does. Except she did a little bit better than me, right? So I don't have a $10 billion company, but she does. And this is her device. It's called a nanotainer. So what does it do? And who has believed in her? Who has supported her? Am I the only person that thinks this is amazing? No. Many, many influencers think it's amazing. You might recognize Hillary Clinton from the last presidential election. This is her husband, Bill. He advertises her company a lot. George Shultz, the former Secretary of State, he actually is on the board of directors for her company. And then you all know Walgreens, it's right down the street. Walgreens has at least 40 devices in their stores with more to come. So again, by all estimates, Elizabeth Holmes is crushing it. Her technology is in the military. It's in medevac copters. The Secretary of Defense from the military is on her board of directors. So again, by all accounts, she is just doing an amazing job. So, how does it work? Well, I want you to hear in her words how it works. Play a quick 90-second clip, and I think Tamika's going to help me with the volume on this one. And then after that, we'll talk about it a little bit. But again, see how the scientific method has made this possible.
For the very first time, Elizabeth Holmes is opening up the secret labs of the Finalists. In 2003, the 19-year-old Elizabeth Holmes dropped out of Stanford and founded Finalists with the hope of using small amounts of blood, just a few drops, to do what normally took numerous tubes. Most of us have never happens. Testing blood may seem like a simple process, but in fact there are numerous steps that can impact the results. For example, the tourniquet. How long is that supposed to be? Was that alcohol or iodine used to clean my arm? What's the size of the needle? And why are there so many tubes? The anti-fire medicine is not standardized, nor are the various reagents used for the testing itself. Never are the machines that finally spit out the results. It is a big, $75 billion industry with thousands of players controlling little pieces of the process. Heroes wants all of it, okay? The result is this black box. The company says it can run up to 40 different tests on a tiny sample of blood.
We've designed it to allow for the same operations that a technologist can do in the laboratory.
Holmes believes that a finger stick, instead of a needle, will make people more likely to get their blood tested. I'll do this myself. Tiffany, hello. It's good, right? For what it's worth, this Finalists blood test put my cholesterol at 170. My own doctor put it to be 169, just the week before.
So very accurate, amazing, right? A drop of blood, she gets the same result that all these other companies get, but it's not painful, it's a lot cheaper, takes a lot less time. This is her device, and as scientists, you're going to appreciate how it works. It's a very interdisciplinary device. So you have to understand physics and engineering, how to make this handling robot, chemistry, how to use a spectrophotometer, and then finally a thermocycler. How do we amplify DNA to see cancerous genes? It's an amazing piece of equipment. So again, this story is a story about the scientific method and the importance of the scientific method in science, but in your everyday life as well. Fortune magazine said this is a CEO out for her blood, and I would agree she is. But this is sort of where the story takes a turn, right? It takes a little devious turn. And so we find out she's out for blood, but she's out for bad blood. And it's not Taylor Swift that's going to play her in the movie, but it's Jennifer Lawrence. And you might say, what is he talking about? What is happening? I'm going to show you a second clip. And the second clip I'm going to show you says what happened in the last couple years. What we realize is Elizabeth Holmes actually has been using the scientific method, but not in a correct way. So let's watch this clip and see why. Again, a very short clip.
Elizabeth Holmes, once Silicon Valley's fastest rising star, is now under the harsh glare of a very different kind of spotlight. This please raise your right hand. She's finally forced to answer to the Securities and Exchange Commission as she's investigated for an alleged elaborate, years-long fraud.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Suddenly, the woman who always seemed to have all the answers.
We're the only lab company that is actually really focused on meeting with transparency.
Now had none.
I don't know specifically. I'm not sure. I don't know exactly. I just don't know.
With Theranos' claims now under the microscope,
Did it concern you that a number of tests weren't working on Theranos' devices?
her carefully crafted narrative began to unravel. Like those dramatic claims she peddled to board members like George Shultz, the former Secretary of State.
Was Theranos' technology deployed in emergency rooms, hospitals, and lab practices? Was it Theranos manufacturing plants that were deployed? Was it ever deployed in
She was challenged sentence by sentence on what she told Fortune in that star-making cover story.
Is the statement that Theranos only offers more than 200 and it's ramping up to offer more than 1,000 of this for a diagnostic test out of the research? Is that statement correct?
Right now, I don't think it is.
And there was
Okay, and I don't think it is either. When you look at this, you'll notice that there was only one other person really who said, you know what, this doesn't seem right. And this gentleman's name is Tyler Shultz. If that last name rings a bell, it's because Tyler Shultz is the grandson of George Shultz, who's on the board of directors. He went to his grandfather and said, I'm a technician in this lab, but it doesn't make sense. The reliability of our data is very low. Our positive controls are only 60% accurate. I talked to a student today about positive controls. And the positive control is saying that's something that works. And so if you were to read this sentence, for example, let's say I said, read that title. Which of these words is written in red? Well, before we answer that, what we have to do is we have to know what red looks like, right? We gotta know something that we know is red, and that's our positive control. So Tyler Schultz on his shirt. We also have to have a negative control that's black. Something that you see that's black that doesn't show that. Then we can go ahead and say, okay, we know what red is, we know what black is. Now we can look at the title and we can see, what is the red word. Their positive controls in Theranos were only 60% accurate. What that's like is if his shirt read this. He's saying that middle word is red, and he's claiming that's red, but we know it's not quite red. So he saw that it was quite interesting. He understood the variability in his data, he made his own interpretations, he drew his own conclusions. The hardest part was this. How do you fight against being a sheep? How is that possible? Humans, all humans, me, you, everyone, we had a tendency to follow the herd. It's part of human nature. And his grandfather was saying, Tyler, don't worry about it, not a problem. He said, you know what? There's a lot of smart people working at this company. A lot of people donated money. It must work. And Tyler said, you know what? No, it doesn't work. He followed his senses, his empirical senses. He believed them over his authority, right? Over his grandfather. So it's very interesting. And so what you're seeing in this is the scientific method is enduring. It's something you won't forget. You might forget the structure of amino acids in 5 years, but you're not going to forget the scientific method you worked so hard to learn through your experiments over the last couple of years. So you might say at this point, well, who cares? How does this apply to you? And I encourage you as a student, it's always good to ask that question. Whenever you're taught anything, who cares, right? We got to have an answer to that. If we don't, then there's an issue. And so I would say this. I'll give you a couple of reasons you should care. There's a small company you might know of now called Juul. Juul is a company that makes different vaping devices. They make e-cigarettes, things of that nature. When I first heard of it as a professor of science, I'm like, oh no, we're tricking people. Cigarette sales are declining in youth, so we're giving them something new to smoke, right? Something new. But then I'm like, well, maybe I'm being too harsh on this company. Maybe I should give them a chance. And so I looked at their mission statement, and I said, well, what's their mission statement? To improve the lives of the world's 1 billion adult smokers by eliminating cigarettes. So I'm like, okay, maybe they're trying to give a healthy alternative. And I said, well, let's apply the scientific method to that, because I remember this story. And so the scientific method I applied was this. I went ahead and I looked at the cigarettes, the vaping devices. They look like friends. Let's compare them. Cigarettes versus Juuls. What's the difference? Cigarettes have tobacco, which can help contribute to cancer. Juuls don't. Like, okay, maybe there's something there. But cigarettes have nicotine, which is addictive. And Juuls do too. Then cigarettes have formaldehyde. That's what we use to preserve dead bodies in the research lab. Juuls have it too. Volatile organic compounds, both have it. And so you can see, at a certain point, I'm like, well, what's the independent variable? If this is my control group, cigarettes, and my experimental group is Juuls, what's the independent variable? Tobacco. Okay, but look at all my standardized variables that do the same thing. And what do? They all cause cancer. So that made me a little skeptical. But again, applying the scientific method. You could apply it to social media use. Does social media decrease attention span? I don't know, but we could test it. We could see, do flashing boxes in front of your face all day long prevent you from hearing what someone's saying? Maybe, right? We could use science to do that. So it's very interesting. So science allows you to detect things that are completely unbelievable, right? Completely unbelievable. So how do we apply this to the real world? In my college, what we did is we redesigned our entire course schedule at North Park University to create something called Catalyst 606. And what we did is we freed up Wednesday afternoons completely free, so students could go out in the city, collaborate with biotech companies, other scientific companies, learn the method of science, and hopefully those will lead into careers. The National Science Foundation has just awarded our university, and I'm proud to be a member of the research team, a $650,000 grant to bring students to North Park, give them scholarships to pursue that Catalyst 606 program that I mentioned recently. So they can engage with companies, lead them to jobs, but then I think most importantly, teach them the scientific method that they can use in a discerning manner throughout their lives to see, is this a real statement, is it not? I can test it with my own eyes, test it with my own ears, and learn to believe my empirical senses. Okay, so at this point in the talk, there could be some people out there still that are maybe like, I don't know if I believe Dr. Brown about the importance of the scientific method. But the beauty of it is, you don't have to believe me. You can test it for yourself. I encourage you to listen to this podcast. It's called The Dropout. It's about Elizabeth Holmes and her story. You can watch the movie when it comes out with Jennifer Lawrence as well. And finally, I encourage all of us, let's use the research experiences you've worked hard to generate these last several years to make the world a more positive place and have a positive impact. So thank you very much for your attention, and I can answer any questions that you have at this time. I do not have a Twitter handle, I'm sorry. but I do have an email. So my email is brownsciencegroup@gmail.com. So brownsciencegroup@gmail.com. And when you think of questions, one thing I'll mention, my shameless plug, so I might as well say them out loud. If you're a high school student and you're looking forward to going to college soon, or you're thinking about college, you're not sure, my students and I last semester created a podcast. It's a place where I turn on the mic and the students talk and we listen to them. So it's not too much me talking, a little bit, mostly them. They have great college advice on a lot of different topics. So is college for you? Is it important for your life or is it not? What's the point of college? How do you pick out class schedules? How do you succeed? I encourage you to listen to it if you're interested. It's called Dr. Brown's Declassified College Survival Podcast. And then finally, North Park University has a summer science academy with all those different topics if you're interested. They're week-long camps where you work with professors and undergraduate students in a research setting. So any questions at all? Yes?
What made you get into science and then why did you stick with it?
Yeah. I think what made me get into science is I always had sort of a fascination with just the natural world. So I was always drawn to biology, just how things work. And then I think the thing I liked most about science was the fact that I didn't have to believe what someone else told me. Not that we shouldn't ever, but I didn't have to believe that. I could look it up for myself. And then a lot of times things I thought were true or I was told were true ended up not being true. And so I sort of like that idea of just having an objective way to evaluate things. Yeah. And I also like doing things. I don't like sitting and listening too much, so I like active processes, so I enjoy the research part of it. Yes?
You said some of your research is in nanotechnology and bio. What specifically?
Sure. Oh, sure, yes. So the question was, some of my research is with nanoparticles and biology, and what do I specifically do? So my lab, what we do is we take nanoparticles that are titanium dioxide nanoparticles. They're considered very non-toxic for people, so you'll find them in sunscreen. You'll find them actually, it's a little disgusting, but in some salad dressings at Wendy's and Burger King. So they're considered non-toxic for people, but we take them, we biologically modify the surface of the nanoparticle to make it do things related to diagnostics and therapeutics for cancer. So, for example, we'll put a fake piece of DNA on the nanoparticle to target a cancer gene. Or we might put a little peptide sequence on the nanoparticle called a nuclear localization sequence to bring the nanoparticle to the nucleus of the cell where the DNA is. So we pretty much use it on our goal, and I don't have a $10 billion company, and it doesn't work yet, so that's my disclaimer. It works in a lab, but not in people yet. Our goal is to make one single theranostic device. So one nanoparticle that you could modify that would detect cancer and then treat cancer. But it's only happening in a dish right now with cancer cells, so it's not happening in people. Yes?
Who's going to star you as you in your movie?
Who's going to star me in my movie? Okay, we need someone who can act a lot better than me, so we'll have to find someone. Yes?
What was the topic of
You know, the topic of my TED Talk was, so the topic of my TED Talk was, if we change science education, would we change the world? And so it talks about some things that are similar to here, but it goes on tangents as well. So it's quite a different talk than what you just heard. So I encourage you to listen to it. And really my whole thesis for the talk is saying, if we allow people to experience the scientific process themselves, sort of how you're all doing, that could lead to changing the world. And I talk about how. Yes? It's a very good question. As I transition to being a high school teacher, will I continue the research in nanotechnology? I would love to continue the research in nanotechnology, having high school students do it instead of college students, and helping them, learn the process, the scientific method through that. So I would love to, yeah. So we'll see. We don't know, but I would see. I would love to do that, yeah. I think that'd be a wonderful thing to be able to do, to have a nanoscience lab and have kids explore those questions, and then have it lead to tangible findings that could impact health. Yeah. So I would love to. Yeah. We'll see. We'll see. Very good questions.
Alex has a question right there.
Why did you want to teach high school students as opposed to college students? What made you transition?
That's a good question. So why did I want to teach high school students instead of college students? I very much enjoy my job in higher education. I enjoy working with college students, so there's nothing negative about that. But my favorite part of the job is teaching. And as a college professor, only a small part of your week is actually teaching in the classroom. So how many hours a week do you think I teach? 4. Some weeks, 4, 12. Usually on average, maybe 8, 9 hours a week or so. And so that's my favorite part, being in the classroom. The other time, I'll be working with advising students, or I'll be writing up a paper, or I'll be writing up a research grant like the one you saw that we got. And I enjoy those, but as time goes on, I find it a little less enjoyable to sit in front of my computer in my office by myself, typing away, and I find myself wanting to be in the classroom more. And I've worked with several high school students on science projects over the years, and I just found it such an enjoyable experience. And I think there's something neat. College students have native enthusiasm for science too, definitely. But there's something really interesting about catching someone at a slightly younger age when they're still learning the process and having a really big positive impact on them at that stage. So I think that's why, yeah. Yeah, it's just I can't use that pun too much, right? Any other questions? Do any of you guys listen to podcasts? I'm just curious. If you ever listen to a podcast once in your life, raise your hand. I'm just curious. Okay, good. I didn't know. Good. There's an audience out there. Well, you guys, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to talk to you today.
We are in transition right now, and we're waiting for Aaron, but also there was a bell to signal the transition. Is Aaron here? Oh, okay. Well, we're gonna try to keep our day on schedule, and we've got a couple minutes here, and so I was like, this is kind of my worst nightmare of what to do now in these couple minutes. So I'm going to show you this picture to burn this into your head while we get Aaron's computer set up. And this is a story about one of my first research experiences. So I did a project where the goal was to see if the leaves from a tree called an acacia tree that grows a lot in hot, arid climates could be used to feed animals. And it's a toxic plant. And the types of animals that are grown in the regions where this plant grows, like goats, are really popular. And so the idea behind the research was the way cow stomachs work versus the way goat stomachs work are different. Cows have a multi-chambered stomach. They're ruminant animals. And this plant material wasn't toxic to cows. So what's going on in cows that turns a toxic plant material into a non-toxic plant material? And could we take that toxic plant material and put it in the stomach of cows? And that would turn this toxic plant material into a non-toxic plant material that could then be used for agricultural purposes in African countries. And that was the question I was trying to answer. So a big tool for my research at the University of Illinois was this type of cow. And we called them colloquially window cows. And so what I did was I had to take a big bag of plant material, and I had to put that plant material right in this hole in the side of a cow, and then the next day I had to go and get it back. And window cows were a pretty popular curiosity at the University of Illinois. And the local news was going to do a story on window cows. Now, I didn't know how to do all of this stuff by myself, and I didn't have access to this as a freshman or sophomore at the University of Illinois. So I relied on the help of a senior lab member called Mauricio. Now, Mauricio was in the College of Agriculture, Consumer, and Environmental Sciences at the University of Illinois so that he could bring his knowledge back to South America and change lives and change agriculture there. And he had a thick accent, but he was really enthusiastic, and I loved working with him. So we went there, and there was a student working on the farm making one of the window cows really pretty. So they were going to be on the news, right? You want to put your best cow face forward on the local news in Champaign-Urbana. Now, what ended up happening with the window cow is when we got back, this student was in a panic, and there was a window cow running around. And she needed help, and she let us know. And there was no doubt. So she's screaming, "Help, help!" Mauricio goes, "No problem, no problem, no problem." And he goes over there, "Greg, come with me." That's a bad accent. So we go over there and see how we can help. And what we did was the three of us enclosed this window cow and kept taking steps forward. And the window cow didn't want to be caught and didn't want to be restrained. And the window cow started doing cartoon stuff, putting its head down, doing one of these on the ground. And I said, "Mauricio, man, I'm not comfortable with this." "Oh, don't worry, don't worry, don't worry, we got this." And then the cow charged at us. And Mauricio said, "No problem, no problem, no problem." I said, "I'm not comfortable with this, I'm starting to sweat." And he goes, "It's okay, it's okay." And he said, "Make yourself big." And so I did that. "Make yourself big." And so the cow charged at us. And then it stopped and it turned around and it went back towards the corner. He goes, "Okay, take a step." And we took a step in, and we cornered this cow, and it charged again. And I kept saying, Mauricio, I don't like this. And we were getting really close, and as we were getting close, the cow was getting closer to us when it was charging. And I could see all the juices coming out of its nose when it was snorting on the ground. And I could see it moving dirt when it was snorting on the ground. And it was getting really close. And one time, it's charging, and he was saying, make yourself big, make yourself big. And the cow charged, and he goes, Greg, hit it! And I closed my eyes, and I made a fist. And I went like this, boom! And I hit the cow right on the head. And I opened my eyes, and that cow was looking right back at me. Just sitting there. I don't think I heard it, if you ever see how big a cow really is. And I was like, okay, I think I did the right thing. And I looked over at Mauricio, and Mauricio was like this. And I said, Mauricio, what's wrong? Tell me what I'm supposed to do now. And he said, grab it, grab it. And I grabbed the short rope that was around the cow's head, and he came over and he took it from me, and he secured the situation. And on our truck ride back to campus, Mauricio said, Greg, you did the wrong thing. And I said, what do you mean? He said, you told me to hit it, Mauricio. And he said, no, I didn't mean hit it. I meant hit it, run. And the reason that I want to tell you guys that story is because I've read a lot of your papers. And I saw how many hours you guys put into the research, into the lab work, into writing that paper. And at times, it had to feel like there was a bull charging right at you. And you guys are all sitting here because you stood there and you hit it, and you didn't hit it, run. So with that, I'd like to present our third finalist, and that's Aaron Freeman from Oak Park and River Forest High School.
Hello, my name is Aaron Freeman. I'm from Oak Park and River Forest High School. My experiment investigated the effect of silica on the health and lead uptake of a non-hyperaccumulator of lead and the phytoremediation of lead-contaminated soil. I've always loved being outdoors and being in a natural environment, so I was really inspired to do my project on an environmental issue. And over the summer, I read an article about a community in East Chicago that was experiencing lead toxicity in their soil because they were near a site of a former lead smelter. So I found that lead is an extremely toxic element, and when ingested by humans, it can be detrimental to almost every major system in the human body. One way to remove lead from soil is a process called phytoremediation. And in this process, plants are planted in contaminated soil, and as they grow, they draw contaminants into their shoots, where the contaminant is stored, and then the plants are harvested and disposed of. However, because many of the contaminants that are used, that are remediated in phytoremediation, are toxic to the plant, it stunts the growth of the plant and often causes the plant to die, so there's room for improvement of sustainability of this process. The plant I chose to use in phytoremediation is called Dinopyrum intermedium, more commonly referred to as intermediate wheatgrass. And this plant is a grass and part of a group of plants called poals, which includes grasses, sedges, and rice. And these plants are unique because they're considered active accumulators of silica. And this means that they're made up of more than 1% silica by weight. And this is possible because they have a silica transport protein that allows them to carry very large concentrations of silica into their shoots. Other plants use dissolution to transport silica, so they can only dissolve a certain amount of silica in their water sources. In a study by Momberdian et al. In 2013, it was found that when silica is introduced to plants, it binds to the cell wall and increases the structural integrity of the cell. This can protect against many biotic and abiotic stresses, one of those being heavy metal stress. When heavy metals are introduced into these plants, they bind with silica on the cell wall, where they're kept out of the interior of the cell so they cannot interfere with cell function. The overall purpose of my experiment was to create a more sustainable and efficient process of photoremediation that would thoroughly clean soil, and ultimately to decrease the negative health effects caused by lead in soil. My experimental hypothesis stated that if lead-contaminated soil was treated with a silica soil treatment and thionyl intermedium was used in the photoremediation of lead, then the harmful effects of lead on the plant and the amount of lead that the plant could take up would be, the harmful effects of lead on the plant would be decreased and the amount of lead that the plant could take up would be increased. My null hypothesis stated that there would be no statistically significant difference between the individual means of control and experimental groups. I planted 90 thionyl intermedium plants in lead-contaminated soil, 30 of which, my control group, were watered with deionized water, 30 were watered with 5 millimolar sodium silicate, and 30 were watered with 35 millimolar sodium silicate in concentrations adopted from Bachelik et al. In 2011. I measured root length, shoot length, total plant length, and lead uptake. The first step in my procedure was soil preparation. I dried the soil so I could accurately take its mass, then I created my lead contaminant solutions, and then I potted and contaminated my soil. The next step in my procedure was growth. I created my 5 millimolar and 35 millimolar sodium silicate solutions, and then I allowed the plants to grow for 2 weeks while watering them with their respective solutions. After 2 weeks, I harvested the plants and measured their root length, their shoot length, their total plant length. And I used this process of spectrophotometry adapted from John Mouldine et al. In 2015 to determine the lead uptake of these plants. In this process, I calibrated the spectrophotometer with the deionized water blank. Then I created 4 standard solutions ranging from 7.16 times 10 to the negative 7th molar lead nitrate to 7.16 times 10 to the negative 3rd molar lead nitrate. Then I added an indicator to these called DMTD, which reacts with metal ions. Then I analyzed these samples using spectrophotometry to create a standard curve relating absorbance to the amount of lead in the plant. As you can see, absorbance is on the y-axis, and the amount of lead in milligrams is on the x-axis, and this is a fairly linear curve. For my experimental groups, I took a 20% hydrogen peroxide solution, a 20% nitric acid solution, and a 30% hydrogen peroxide solution. I added my plant samples to this solution to be broken down, and after 8 hours, I added my DMTD indicator and analyzed them using spectrophotometry. This graph displays data for one of my statistically significant groups of data. On the y-axis is average root length in centimeters, and on the x-axis are my groups. Both the first experimental group and the second experimental group produced higher values for average root length than the control group. However, there was only statistical significance between the first experimental group and the control group, with a p-value of 0.02 as determined by my t-test, which was under my alpha value of 0.05. I had similar results for average absorbance. Absorbance in liters per mole per centimeter is shown on the y-axis, and on the x-axis are my groups. Again, both experimental groups yielded higher values for absorbance than the control group. However, there was only statistical significance between the first experimental group and the control group, with a p-value of 0.02. These results suggest that at certain concentrations, silica has the ability to increase the health of a plant under stress from lead, and to increase the ability of that plant to take up lead. One uncertainty I ran into came with the use of an analog spectrophotometer, which produces certain uncertainties in reading values. Additionally, my growing environment was less than ideal. There was a heater nearer to the bottom level of my plant samples than any other level, which may have changed the temperature at which these plants grew and may have affected their growth. Additionally, my indicator was imperfect. DMTD reacts with all metal ions, not just lead, and although I use deionized water throughout my whole process, it's possible that more metal ions enter my solutions for spectrophotometry. In future research, I would investigate a much wider variety of silica concentrations. It's not clear to me why the 35 millimolar silica concentration didn't produce better or similar results to the 5 millimolar sodium silica concentration. Additionally, genetic manipulation to increase a plant's ability to take up silica, to create more active accumulators of silica could be beneficial in many areas. Being an active accumulator of silica and accumulating silica in the cell wall protects against many biotic and abiotic stresses other than heavy metal stress. Additionally, I would investigate a wider variety of plants. Thionon medium is one of many active accumulators of silica, and rice has actually been shown to be the most effective. There are a multitude of areas that can be affected by lead in soil. Anywhere that has used lead paint to areas near a former lead smelter to places near a mine have the potential to have lead in their soil. Therefore, the creation of a more efficient and sustainable method of phytoremediation has the potential to have an extremely significant impact on billions of people around the world. Additionally, the use of active accumulators of silica in phytoremediation as a sustainable plant expands the amount of plants that are available for use in this area, and therefore expands the environments and the climates at which phytoremediation can be carried out. Phytoremediation, as a method of remediation, is the most financially viable and publicly accepted of all methods of remediation. This benefit is extremely prevalent in low-income areas, which constitute a majority of areas affected by lead in soil. The community in East Chicago that I read the article on, which inspired me to do this project, is using a method of remediation called excavation, in which the whole top layer of soil is physically removed from the site and replaced with new soil. This process, however, creates a lot of disturbances to the communities, and many of the people in the community are forced to evacuate because a lot of lead-contaminated dust is put into the air. Phytoremediation, as an alternative, acts as a soil stabilizer because the roots of the plants in phytoremediation keep the soil in place. Additionally, phytoremediation accesses deeper levels of soil and groundwater because plants are continually taking up and filtering groundwater. The creation of a more sustainable and efficient method of phytoremediation in these low-income areas makes for an extremely low amount of disturbance, which creates a higher level of economic stability for these low-income areas, which is very important for the lives of the people who live there. These are some people I'd like to thank that helped me along the way with my research. This is my list of 30+ references. Thank you.
I'd like to introduce you guys to our second invited speaker and final speaker of the day. Kristen Vogt is a local girl that grew up around Chicago, and she is currently the Director of STEAM and Innovation for the Boy Scouts of America. Dr. Vogt just received her PhD from the University of Illinois in Chicago, but what? In science education. How I found Dr. Vogt was in a web search about citizen science, and I think out of a lot of the things that came together today, this one is probably the most unlikely thing that happened, but one of the coolest. Just when I was about to kind of give up and go through another wave to search for other speakers, Dr. Vogt came through, and I think she's really going to deliver a great message to you guys today. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Vogt.
Thank you guys so much. A little bit more in depth about me. I generally don't go by doctor just yet, but I like everybody just simply call me Kristen. I'm actually from the far south side of Chicago. I'm from Beverly. A few things about me is, number one, I'm a citizen scientist. Believe it or not, my undergraduate, even though I had experience in the lab, I worked in the coastal archaeology lab at University of Oregon, where I went to undergrad, go Ducks. But my actual undergrad major wasn't in science. I majored in medieval studies. And no, I don't work at Ren Fair. I will never work at Ren Fair. And yes, I do love Game of Thrones, but I'm not here to discuss that with you guys. I'm a citizen science because I truly am curious about the world around me. And one of the best things about being here today is seeing all the different sciences around me. Whether I'm hearing about drones, whether I'm hearing about Plumpy Nut, I'm really thrilled to hear that people are still paying attention to malnutrition. That was a huge part of my undergraduate research. And I'm really excited to see all of the different things because you guys truly care about this world and it shows in your research. And that's a huge part about being a citizen scientist. More about my doctorate, I do study both cause and effect. The difference is I don't necessarily study plants or animals or other different types of natural phenomena. I'm actually looking at the research subjects right now. Can you guess what they are? High school students. Ooh. Y'all are my favorite. I like you guys so much more than anything else I've ever studied before. And one of the biggest reasons is because not only do you guys make me laugh, you guys make me cry, not because you bullied me, don't try that, I'm from the south side, but more importantly, I've learned so much because guess how old I was when Facebook came out? No, that's a terrible question to ask because then I'm going to feel old. But I was a freshman in college when Facebook was made available to me. So when I was starting off my young adult life, we didn't have Twitter until I was in graduate school. I know. So I didn't grow up with it, but you guys did. And watching how you guys are learning and how you're engaging and how the world is affecting you is so interesting and so important. And understanding how that works within citizen science is crucial in bringing science forward in this day and age. So I feel like this is obligatory. This is kind of how I feel today. But I'll tell you guys a little bit more about my own personal experience within citizen science. And it starts right back in Oregon. I mentioned my research within the Coastal Archaeology Lab, and part of that also included a subject matter that I'm not as familiar with, or I wasn't familiar with at the time, which was working specifically with embryology. And when I mean embryology, I'm specifically talking about fish and how fish reproduced, and specifically going out into the coastal range. This is in Coos County and further south into Douglas County in very, very rural Oregon. We're talking banjos and moonshine here. Paddle faster, if you will. And part of the work we did as citizen scientists, none of us had backgrounds. None of us had backgrounds in biology, but we truly wanted to make sure that the salmon and the trout within our region were doing better, that they were getting healthier, that they were able to reproduce more, that there were more
fish for the bears to eat, that there were more fish for us to harvest, and that there were more other types of animals that could survive. Because, for instance, with the big salmon die-off that happens every year, a lot of the plants and animals that live in these ecosystems cannot survive if they do not have those bodies to survive on. And a huge part of that isn't just tagging the salmon, which I got to do a lot, which was really cool. And I don't mean that just as a pun, because yeah, on average the water temperature was 70 degrees, if not colder. But we also had to be able to construct different dams for the salmon to swim up, different ladders for the salmon to swim up, being able to conduct different types of temperature. Is all of the temperature okay for the salmon to spawn in here? And this is the type of work that, yes, we had PhDs to guide us, but we had community members helping out, because this is their home. And whether you think about it or not, when you are a citizen scientist and you are engaging in this type, when you are assisting scientists as a layperson, you are doing so much to help out this world. And a big part, and I'm moving right into social media, because how does that work? Well, it's more than just Fortnite. I assume Fortnite is social media. Am I doing this right? I'm so old now. So just out of curiosity, I want to see a sign of hands. How many of you are on Instagram? Yeah. How many of you are on Facebook? Oh, there's a lot less Facebooking. I'm interested. How many of you are on Twitter? So a fun fact about me on Twitter, I didn't join until I was almost done with my dissertation. And the people who strong-armed me into joining it were my fellow doctoral students, because, hey, this is a great way to share scientific research. Mind blown. So how many of you, just out of curiosity, when you're on social media, post about your family? I have a toddler, so I kind of have to post it. How about posting about your friends, with your friends? Food? Does anybody post about Cardi B anymore, or do we not like her anymore? I see you, Freeman, I see you. I know how Oak Park rolls. I'm your neighbor, actually. So just out of curiosity, who here knows about the trash challenge? Oh, I know about the trash. So let me tell you guys about the trash challenge, because it was all over Reddit and it was all over Twitter. So this started in Guatemala earlier this year, and it was posted online with the hashtag Trash Challenge. So as we can see here on the left are a couple of individuals where their area was filled with a ton of garbage. And they posted before and they posted after. No Photoshop. This isn't that type of Instagram. This is the idea of, we're going to make this better. And if you look up hashtag Trash Challenge right now, you're going to find people who have done this all over the world. People who have done this in North Carolina, in India, in very, very rural Indonesia, in the Philippines. You know, a lot of these people do not have internet, but they understand the other people in the world are doing this. Let's go viral. Let's show other people the amazing impact that we're having. And this is what citizen scientists do. And, you know, not only why do it, let's make it prettier, but if you look here, this was done in Mumbai not too long ago, where the beaches were absolutely trashed, but citizen scientists and other people got together and said, let's make this beautiful, let's get rid of all this trash. And within a short time, sea turtles had come to lay their eggs there. They had not done that in years. And this was all through going viral and saying, let's work together as citizens and as caretakers of this planet. Now, this impact can go in so many ways. The fact, like, take pictures, get to inspire people. I am sounding so corny right now. If my 18-year-old self could look at me, I would be dying of embarrassment. But this is where we ask for the likes and for the lulz. Are you doing this for good? The gentleman on the left was one of my assistants who helped me when I was an AmeriCorps volunteer on the Oregon coast. He is a PhD in biology. He is not he's not a hobo. A lot of people asked if he was a hobo. But you know, he was doing this because he truly wanted to see the beaches of Oregon better. He wanted to see them pristine and beautiful. And you have to ask yourself, when you are going out, when you are working within citizen scientists and you're taking pictures and you're posting this, are you doing this for good? Are you doing this because you want to feel good, because you want those likes? I'm not myself immune to this. I love it when I see my pictures get retweeted. I love it when I see my pictures get reposted, get liked, get kudos, get wonderful comments. And I have to ask myself, am I doing this for good? And doing good when no one is looking is so hard sometimes, because who will appreciate your hard work if you don't Snapchat it? Now that is the one social media I refuse to get on. Y'all can write that down right now. Kristen Vogt will never be on Snapchat. But that's one thing that we can also participate in and seeing our work online. How many of you have heard of Zooniverse? Okay, I got one little hand here. So Zooniverse is a fantastic way for you guys to contribute to actual science without even leaving your couch. So that's right, while you guys are waiting for Riverdale to come back on, you can whip out your phone or your laptop. Look up Zooniverse, which is a partnership with Adler Planetarium, as well as multiple other scientific laboratories around the world, ranging from the Berkeley Hearst collection of bugs, which I've assisted on, to the Antarctic region collections. They're all over, and what you do is you log in. You can also get updates to certain ones. I was an updater for Storm Tracker for a while because I absolutely love storms. And you can actually take part, compete with other people, and help analyze the data. When they send out the data, you're sending out pictures, you're sending out numbers of plants, of other different phenomena, and you're helping analyze it and go back and contribute. Because a lot of times, so everyone here gathered a lot of data for their work. Now imagine this is data that has been gathered in one region for over 20 years, and nobody's touched it in a couple of years. Can you imagine how much work that's gonna be? And this is where citizen science can come in. You can make an impact, and you don't have to worry about, I have to travel very far, because a lot of you sounded like you traveled really far. You did a lot of work, and seriously, kudos to you guys for that. That is so impressive. Now, one place, this is just one example, but this is Western Shield. You can actually help analyze and track endangered species in Australia. Australia, like all the way across the world, and help analyze the different photography that's there. In this case, I believe it's a wallaby? It's something that's cute and probably jumping around, and that would probably attack me if I got near it. But some other things that you guys could do, for instance, with something like this is Snapshot Serengeti. Look through, analyze pictures, look through, analyze different snapshots, look through, analyze different videos. And when you're doing that, the algorithms go back to the original laboratory, and they're able to use that research. Now, this leads me into another topic of recording of citizen science as a form of citizenship. I do not know where this game is from. I think this is Fallout, but I have no idea. Does anyone know which game this one's from? It is Fallout? Okay, good. I'm not so old. Now, one thing we want to say about recording our citizen science as a form of citizenship, is it really worth it? As a good earthly citizen, we can participate. Why do it? And there's the bottom line that definitely sends chills down my spine, as it has for a lot of times recently. What if the science that we're participating in, that we worked our blood, sweat, and tears off for, what if it's called fake? You know, and this is one of the most challenging things, especially with social media, being able to spread news that's either fake or disastrous or really frightening. You know, how do you do it? How do you challenge the idea of people saying your work is wrong, you're wrong, and all sorts of other things? You know, what if you do if it's going to be ignored, challenged, or belittled? And I say this as someone who's experienced it personally. One of the more painful experiences I've had was when I presented at the American Association of Anthropology, and somebody ripped off my poster and threw it under a table. We were all graduate students. That should not happen. Unfortunately, sometimes you have to pick up and say, I'll show you how it happens, and I'm going to be the bigger person. It stinks, but you guys can do it. And a big part of this is already the skill set that I see right before me. You guys are already able to analyze. You guys are already, by being able to gather your data and present it in a way that I saw today that showcased both morality, maturity, and forethought. I already see a lot of people who have the potential to challenge fake news on social media, and to be able to handle it by saying, I can analyze this, I can critically think through this, and most importantly, I have confidence in myself and I have confidence in my peers. You know, recognize bias when you see research. One thing I absolutely loved seeing from every single one of you, you all mentioned the individuals who helped you along the way. That showcases so much maturity, and more importantly, it showcases that there's no potential bias because you're co-authoring, you have teammates, you have wonderful teachers who are here to support you and to make sure that your research is solid. That makes your research good. And that's something that you should keep going and you should keep remembering. And when you are looking through different types of social media, and especially in different forms of science and social media, you can critically look through it. For instance, I challenge you guys to think, if someone says, getting all of your medicine is not worth it, you should take my oils instead, you have to ask yourself, is it because there's peer-reviewed research behind this, or is it because you're going to sell me those next? That's a big thing. Always look for the dollar sign behind all of it. Look, when you're on Instagram, look to see if it's a sponsored piece. When you're on Facebook, look to see if somebody's sponsoring it. It's one thing if you're getting sponsoring from a lab where there is going to be a ton of vetting, when there's going to be a ton of critical thinking, or if it's somebody who's just out to make a buck. So, and that leads me to actually finding the scientists online. So I mentioned Twitter, and I mentioned I didn't join Twitter until this guy actually, Eric Early. He forced me to. He's one of my good friends from ComSciCon, which is a national science communication workshop for scientists who are finishing up their doctoral degrees complete. Believe it or not, he is actually studying cyborgs. He actually is, he's a biomechanical engineer out of Northwestern University who actually studies fast twitch movement in limbs so he can ultimately create RoboCop. He says he's not creating RoboCop, but I don't believe him. Additionally, so Eric routinely posts about his research and he will routinely tag his lab mates in it. This is the type of collaboration we'd love to see. We'd love to see you guys collaborate to showcase, this is my research, this is my friend's research. So another person up here is Brittany Mall. She is a researcher with the University of Wisconsin. She previously was at the state of Indiana, and she specifically studies crop science. And if you look at these hashtags and look at this stuff, you can see all sorts of science happening. Even if you're not a PhD, even if you're just a citizen scientist who's just doing the stuff on the ground, you can engage with these guys. You can talk to them. I mean, Brittany is a cute, blonde, nice girl who would absolutely love nothing more to have some of you chat with her about what does it mean to be a scientist out in the field. And just as a little FYI, how many people here have not been accepted to college yet? You know, your juniors, freshmen, whatever. Okay, so we've got a few here. So believe it or not, you can communicate with them online this way. Say, hey, Miss Mall, I loved reading your research. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? And more than likely, a lot of these people will say, I'm really happy to talk to you. Let's talk. And if you play your cards right, maybe they might give you a really strong letter of recommendation, and then you go to Northwestern on a full ride scholarship. Hey, man, dreams happen, okay? Dreams come true sometimes, right? So, also support them. Retweet their stuff. People love seeing that their work is getting recognized. They love seeing that people are talking about their work. And also, when I'm talking about Instagram, so I love Instagram because I love photography, and my alternative career dream is to be a storm chaser and take cool pictures of tornadoes and star in a movie with Bill Paxton. That won't ever happen. Nobody got that reference. I'm old. So one of the best ways in which we can really engage with citizen science is online via photography. So this is the forest preserves. If you guys take some really cool pictures as citizen scientists, they will retweet, they will post your pictures up. I was super proud that one of my pictures ended up on the cover of Storm Hour, and it was literally just me hanging out the window to get some pictures of some 5-foot-long icicles that happened on my house. We want to see people showcase their work. We want to see people take part in citizen science through the telling of citizen science. And if you're especially interested in the burns that are happening right there in the middle, the forest preserves of Cook County, I found out, are the largest forest preserves in the country, and they are looking for burn volunteers. If you're over the age of 18, they can train you to become a firefighter, and you get to set the prairie on fire. And it is really, really cool. I gotta tell you, it's one of the coolest experiences to watch that thing go poof. Because that's how they sound, you know. And this happened recently. Does anybody remember seeing this? Did anybody see this? Okay, all my Oak Park people did. Yeah, you go. I see you Huskies. my cousin went to OPRF, so Yell got a special place in my heart. So, can anybody tell me who this is? Anyone? Okay, so that's a black hole. I'm very happy. Nobody thinks that's just like a random smudge on a mirror. Does anybody know who, huh? Someone say that's our sun? How about the young lady? Yes, that's Katie Bowman, so I kind of gave it a big hint up here. Katie Bowman is alongside the data that got us to the black hole. As you guys have guesstimated, or as you guys have said, this is the first picture of a black hole that we've ever had. Does anybody know what a black hole does? It eats everything. The black hole is my brother Kyle. I'm gonna tell him. Yeah, that's actually a really good estimation. So that's a really good explanation, sorry. Black holes are the most destructive forces in the universe. They create a vacuum as well as a center around it known as the event horizon that pulls in all matter and then proceeds to disintegrate it and have all sorts of other phenomena happen within it. It's usually done after the collapse of a star. So for the person who said, is that the sun, they're not entirely incorrect. But yeah, Katie Bowman was the MIT scientist who found it. That was the picture of her when she literally, all the algorithms that she did to get that telescope picture went through and saw the black hole. But here's the thing. I didn't learn this from listening to any of my podcasts, though I listened to a lot of podcasts. Now I'm going to have to listen to yours, Dr. Brown. The Dropout was hands down the best 6 hours of my life. But that's the thing is, I learned about her not from National Geographic, not from a textbook. I learned about her because like 6 or 7 of my friends were retweeting her. She was all over Reddit, and a bunch of my friends were posting about it on Facebook. This scientific discovery that I saw before me and this inspiring story of a young lady within STEM, I learned about that through Facebook. And that's the thing you guys have to remember, is that even though a lot of times as a citizen scientist, you gotta focus on your research, you gotta focus on your data, you've gotta focus on this, also focus on your communication. Who's your audience? Who are the people that you can talk to? Because once you're online, you can spread that message to everyone. Especially, and the reason why I brought up my age is because I see people in front of me who really grew up with this. You guys are almost like that quote from Batman where he's like, I was born in it, held it. Okay, nobody got that reference. The adults did. Okay, that's all I needed. But that's the thing is you guys are more literate in this than any other generation before you. Use that skill. Use that skill. Take pictures of these posters you saw. Hashtag each other. Bring each other up. Say, exchange numbers, exchange Twitter handles saying, I loved your research. I loved what you did. Take pictures on the weekend of your research that you've done, of the work that you're completing, of the volunteering that you're doing, because it's going to show and it's going to be beautiful when it happens. So, in conclusion, and even unseen and anonymous, you're still a citizen of this planet and you're probably online. So be a force of good, be a citizen scientist, and hashtag you're good. And please feel free to follow me on Chris VB or O Kristen Tree.
We're going to let some of the students clear out that are leaving for this class, and then Kristen would like to take any questions that you guys have for her about citizen science or what she does.
Yes. What's the name of that? myself in natural history museums. And so from there, I got my first master's at Southern Illinois, which was actually museum administration. And from there, I always stayed, doing free stuff or fun involving science on the side. So forest reserves need somebody to gather grasshoppers. Well, I'm not doing anything tonight. And a lot of those people are probably going to go out and party afterwards, so I might as well go. So another thing I didn't really talk about is I also was an intern at Burning Man. So if anybody knows what Burning Man is, it's basically expensive Coachella, but a huge part of that involved permits and design. So a lot of physicists actually, and I had to work with them on making sure everything was safe, so a lot of fire safety and whatnot, and it made me really wonder additionally how that form of science worked. And I got really into physics at that point, and I always just happened to do stuff, and that's when I realized I was very interested in studying how people learned about science outside of the classroom, and that's what got me my PhD. So my actual PhD dissertation title is on equity of science in education, specifically within out of school. Sure.
You said your degree, I didn't hear it yet. So your doctoral thesis.
Oh, the title of my dissertation is Discourses of Equity in Out of School Learning in a STEM
we have our final results in. So before that, we would like to invite the 3 finalists up to the stage. So if you could please come up. Since this is a rare treat to have our afternoon judges in the room, I'd like our afternoon judges to stand. Tony Looper, Arlene Manelli, and Kathy Conyer. Please give them a big round of applause. And now I'd like to hand the mic over to the principal of Wheeling High School, Mr. Jerry Cook, and I would like you guys just to show Mr. Cook some love for supporting this wonderful event that we were able to hold to celebrate you guys today at Wheeling High School.
Hi. Mr. Reinhardt, maybe just a loud talker. So welcome back, and I hope you had a great day. It was very informative. I got around to talk to several of you. Very impressive. You're very smart. Very smart. It's like, wow. So this is a great day, and at this time, we're going to award our awards. Sorry, they were like, I wasn't prepared. So, 3rd place. You guys ready? Roll down roll. Maybe I'll keep it out here. Sometimes I think I'm a rapper. A lot of feedback. Mr. Reinhardt, are you okay up there? All right. 3rd place, once again, drum roll. From Oak Park Wood Forest, Aaron Freeman. For 2nd place, I love it, participation, Cecilia Doyle from Oak Park River Forest. So obviously our 1st place winner from Niles West, Alexia Popescu. Congratulations. So once again, thank you very much for coming out. Great presentations, a lot of academics and research here. Thank you to our speakers today, our judges. Once again, at least 2 gentlemen, give them a round of applause. And all of our students who put all their work into it. Have a great day, and hopefully we'll see you maybe next year.
Welcome to